When you're assigned an essay, a good place to begin is with a clear thesis statement. A thesis statement answers the prompt completely, and it's the center of your paper, so that's why it's a good place to start. For a one-paragraph essay, it's a good idea to just start right away with the thesis statement. Usually, you're just trying to answer the prompt quickly and efficiently. It might just be answering it within the class period even, so you need to get started right away. But with a multi-paragraph essay, the thesis usually comes at the end. That's because it seems kind of abrupt when you're reading a thesis statement right at the beginning, so we don't jump to it right away. Just be sure that your thesis statement is the center of your entire paper by answering the prompt clearly and completely. These are the basic rules. You're supposed to have a thesis statement that is on topic, which means it doesn't relate to the world in general. Instead, it relates specifically to the story, poem, or book that you're talking about, or it could just be evidence that you're researching. It should also be sure to take a position that's debatable. In other words, it shouldn't be something that's obviously true, or that's just a summary or a statement of fact, because then you don't even need to write the paper really. We're not trying to write a summary here. We're trying to prove something or think about some complex topic. So in order to do that, you also provide a reason, a rationale for your position being true. These are some thesis statements that don't quite fit the prompt well because they have different problems with them. So in this case, these thesis statements are not on the topic, which means they're not on the story that is being asked about in the prompt. The first prompt says, in the short story, The Most Dangerous Game, does Rainsford learn any lessons about the morality of hunting for sport? So what you'd have to have in this one is something about Rainsford, something about The Most Dangerous Game. And there's nothing about this in this thesis statement. In the prompt on the Cask of Amontillado, it's asking what the story teaches us about revenge. Again, with this second prompt, there's nothing about the Cask of Amontillado. It's just about revenge in general. And while it might be an interesting statement, there's nothing about the story, so it's off prompt. These thesis statements have a problem because they don't take any kind of position, which means they don't give a reason that their statement is true. Sometimes that can end up sounding just like it's a summary of what happens. So in the first one, it says that in the most dangerous game, which is good, and it says Rainsford, which is good. It says that he goes from being the hunter to understanding what it feels like to be the hunted. Well, the plot of the story is just Rainsford being hunted, so we can assume that he understands what it feels like to be hunted, but that's not anything that needs to be proved. It's just summarizing what happens in the story. In the second one, it says that Montresor is so full of pride that he becomes obsessed with seeking vengeance on Fortunato for insulting his family name. Now, it might be true that you'd have to prove that this is because of pride, so this kind of has something you might need to prove a little bit, but mostly it just summarizes why Montresor is taking vengeance on Fortunato. These last thesis statements don't have a reason, don't have a rationale for being true. I think they're the closest to being good thesis statements, though. In the most dangerous game, Rainsford learns that hunting for sport is cruel. Problem with that one is, we're not really sure he learns anything about hunting. The second one, the Cask of Amontillado, shows us through Montresor that the desire for revenge can cause people to behave with inhumanity. Well, that's true. He does behave with inhumanity. This one is pretty close to being a good thesis statement, but I want a little bit more. Now, on this page, we have the topics in blue, the positions in green, and the rationales in purple. So for our first prompt, the thesis statement is, in the most dangerous game, we see that Rainsford learns nothing from his experience of being hunted because he murders General Zaroff without remorse. All right, so we'd have to prove that the murder that he commits is without remorse at the end, and that would show that he has learned nothing from his experience of being hunted. In the second thesis statement, it says the Cask of Amontillado depicts a narrator who has lost his ability to feel pity for the man he is plotting to brutally murder because he's become so obsessed with getting revenge. So here we need to tie in his obsession with revenge and then prove that he has no pity left in him. Those are good points to have to try to prove, and it makes for an interesting essay. Now, if you get to the end of your thesis statement, you get to the end of writing your paper actually, you can actually revise your thesis statement so that it fits your answer more completely. Ask yourself these questions. Does the thesis relate to the topic directly? Does it relate to the poem, the story, the book that you're reading? Does the thesis make a point that is not too obvious? In other words, does it have to be proved? Or is it just basic summary of facts? Or does it take a stance that's so obvious that it's not even very interesting? Does the thesis provide a clear reason the point is true? So this is the rationale part, and it's where you really start to get into the heavy thinking. Does the thesis answer all parts of the prompt? Sometimes we'll have a thesis statement that only answers one part of the prompt, and we need to make it general enough that it answers all the prompt, but also specific enough so that it is about the topic that's been assigned. Finally, sometimes we get through the evidence in the writing of the paper and we realize the thesis is not provable. So we're going to have to revise that thesis to make it provable. So you can go back and change it at the end. In fact, it's probably a good idea if you change things to make sure that they're exactly as you want, especially when there's something as important as a thesis statement.